And there's nothing more distasteful than losing an NFL game. And it's finite. You either win or you lose. And
he's gone! You don't have to worry about it anymore. Kevin Stefanski, the Browns coach, has been fired. I told you. What is happening right now?
Keep the black man down.
It's just overall the mentality, like things are gonna happen. That's just how the league is. And moving forward, just focus on what we can improve, individually. For the next head coach.
I thought that this was going to be a thing. I thought it was inevitable, and I think, it was generally the right move.
So Stefanski got fired because he couldn't get along with the quarterback situation and with Shedeur. So the next coach has to be able to get along with Shedeur. Otherwise, what'd you fire Stefanski for? He's a quality coach. He just didn't handle Shedeur quality.
The Cleveland Browns just made it official. Kevin Stefanski is out. Two-time Coach of the Year. Gone, just like that. And if you've been paying attention, and I mean really paying attention, this wasn't about wins and losses. This wasn't about playoff appearances or offensive schemes. This was about one thing and one thing only: Shedeur Sanders.
He didn't want Shedeur. I believe he was sabotaging to Shedeur, especially in first and goal situations when he kept going wildcat so that Shedeur wouldn't score a touchdown.
Let's break this down for you, because the national media is going to spin this 100 different ways. They're going to talk about dysfunction. They're going to mention Deshaun Watson's catastrophic contract. They'll bring up the revolving door of quarterbacks. But here's the truth bomb nobody wants to say out loud. Kevin Stefanski got fired because he refused to embrace Shedeur Sanders as the guy. Think about it. The Browns went 7-10 this season. Not great, but not historically terrible either. They've got a top 5 defense. Myles Garrett just broke the sack record. Denzel Ward is playing at an all-pro level. The defense isn't the problem. So why fire your head coach now? Why not wait one more year? Why not give him a chance with a full offseason to develop Shedeur? Because Jimmy Haslam saw something he couldn't unsee. He saw a coach who didn't want his 5th-round quarterback. He saw a coach who allegedly preferred Gabriel. He saw a coach who waited until Week 10 to finally start the kid who would lead them to a 4-4 record down the stretch. And Haslam said, enough. The evidence is everywhere if you know where to look. Stefanski's press conferences were cold when it came to Shedeur. Detached, clinical. There was no passion, no belief, no "this is our future" energy. Compare that to how we talked about Baker Mayfield back in the day, or even Joe Flacco during that magical run last year. The difference? Night and day. And here's where it gets spicy. According to reports, Stefanski wanted the Browns to draft Gabriel, not Shedeur, not the guy who everyone knew was first-round talent trapped in a 5th-round body because of his last name. Stefanski wanted someone else, someone who fit his system, someone who wouldn't come with the baggage of Deion Sanders and the media circus and the expectations. But Andrew Berry and Jimmy Haslam saw something different. They saw a quarterback with elite accuracy, pocket presence, and the kind of football IQ you can't teach. They saw a kid who could run the Shanahan-McVay offensive system to perfection. They saw the future. And when your general manager and owners see the future, but your head coach doesn't, that's called a fundamental disconnect. And in the NFL, fundamental disconnects get you fired.
With Shedeur this year, I think that's both mentally, physically, playing the position. He's still very much a work in progress, like many rookie quarterbacks are. But I think we saw some really good things in terms of his playmaking, his accuracy, his ability to extend with his feet.
That's Andrew Berry singing Shedeur's praises. Now ask yourself, when did you ever hear Kevin Stefanski talk about Shedeur like that, with that kind of enthusiasm, with that kind of belief? You didn't, because he didn't have it. Let's talk about what happened this season. Shedeur started as the 4th-string quarterback. Think about that. A kid with first-round measurables, with college tape that spoke for itself, was buried behind Kenny Pickett, Joe Flacco, and Gabriel. How does that happen? How does a coaching staff look at Shedeur Sanders in training camp and practice and say, yeah, he's 4th-string material? It happens when you don't want him there in the first place. The turning point came around Week 10. The Browns were struggling. The offense was anemic, and finally, Stefanski made the move. Shedeur got his shot, and what happened? The Browns went 4-4 with him under center. Not perfect, but competitive. They beat division rivals. They showed fight. They showed potential, and Shedeur showed he belonged. But even then, Stefanski wouldn't fully commit. His press conferences were masterclasses in saying nothing. We're evaluating. We'll see how it goes. It's a process. Meanwhile, Andrew Berry is sitting there watching the tape, watching Shedeur make throws that Gabriel couldn't make, extend plays that Pickett couldn't extend, and he's thinking, this is the guy. And that's when the inevitable became reality.
So Stefanski got fired because he couldn't get along with the quarterback situation and with Shedeur. So the next coach has to be able to get along with Shedeur. Otherwise, what'd you fire Stefanski for? He's a quality coach. He just didn't handle Shedeur quality.
Boom, there it is, the smoking gun. Stefanski lost his job not because he's a bad coach, he's not, but because he couldn't get right with the quarterback situation. And in the NFL, that's a death sentence. Now, let's address the elephant in the room. Was this really about Shedeur, or was it about a broader pattern of dysfunction? Because let's be real, the Browns are a disaster. Deshaun Watson's contract is the worst in NFL history. They traded away Baker Mayfield, who's now thriving in Tampa. They've cycled through more quarterbacks than most teams go through in a decade. The offensive line is a mess. The receiving core is barely NFL caliber outside of maybe Jerry Jeudy. But here's the thing, Stefanski survived all of that. He survived Deshaun Watson. He survived the Baker trade. He survived offensive line injuries and receiver drops and special teams disasters. What he couldn't survive was being on the wrong side of the quarterback debate. Because in the NFL, if you're the head coach and you can't get along with or won't commit to the quarterback your front office believes in, you're done. It's that simple. The quarterback is the most important position in sports, period. And if there's alignment on literally every other issue except the quarterback, guess who's getting fired? Spoiler alert, it's not the GM who drafted him.
Andrew Berry's press conference told you everything you need to know. He praised Shedeur, talked about his progress, mentioned his accuracy, his mobility, his pocket management. But then, and this is the kicker, he said the new head coach would have input on the quarterback situation. Translation, we like Shedeur, but we're not handcuffing the next coach.
Don't set up the new head coach, 2-5. Like, the new head coach is going to have some input into it. Who's running the show in Cleveland? This already got Stefanski fired. The fact that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski are on different pages. Who's running the show in Cleveland?
And that is the million-dollar question. Who is running the show? Because if the new coach comes in with input, and that input conflicts with what Haslam and Berry want, we're right back where we started. Another coach on the hot seat. Another quarterback controversy. Another wasted season. Except that's exactly what got Stefanski fired. So how is the next coach supposed to navigate this minefield? If the new guy comes in and says, I don't think Shedeur is the answer, is he going to get fired too? Because that's the precedent they just set. The Browns are now in a fascinating position. They have 2 first-round picks, they have a dominant defense, they have Shedeur Sanders who, whether you believe in him or not, is going to be given every opportunity to prove he's the franchise quarterback. And they're about to hire a coach who better be on board with that plan. Names are already flying around. Brian Flores, Jim Schwartz, Joe Brady, Cliff Kingsbury, some retreads like Mike McCarthy, some coordinators looking for their first shot. But here's the real question. Who's going to want this job? An organization where the GM is on thin ice despite being retained, where the quarterback situation is complicated at best and controversial at worst, where the cap situation is a nightmare because of Watson's contract, where the offensive line needs a complete rebuild, where the receiving core is barren. Oh, and you're expected to compete in a division with Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and whatever the Steelers decide to do at quarterback. Good luck with that. But let's circle back to the core issue, Shedeur Sanders. Because whether you love him or hate him, whether you think he's the next great NFL quarterback or a 5th-round bust waiting to happen, he's the reason we're here. He's the reason Stefanski is cleaning out his office. He's the reason the Browns are about to conduct yet another coaching search. And honestly, maybe that's not fair to Shedeur. Maybe he's just a kid trying to play football, and the adults around him can't get their act together. Maybe he would have thrived under Stefanski if Stefanski had committed to him from day one. Maybe the entire disaster of this season could have been avoided if they just named him the starter in August instead of burying him on the depth chart. We'll never know. What we do know is this. The Cleveland Browns just fired a 2-time Coach of the Year because of a 5th-round quarterback. Think about how wild that sentence is. Think about the implications. This isn't just about Shedeur Sanders. This is about organizational philosophy. This is about power dynamics between coaches and front offices. This is about what happens when everyone isn't rowing in the same direction. And right now, the Browns are rowing in about 17 different directions.
I just don't want to see a head coach that's purposely trying to harm a young player. If you watch the way Kevin Stefanski was coaching, his interviews, his press conferences, it seemed like he's bothered by Shedeur and he don't want to talk about him. I don't want a head coach like that.
That sentiment right there captures everything. The perception, whether fair or not, was that Stefanski was actively working against Shedeur's success, that he was bothered by the kid, that he resented having to play him. And in professional sports, perception becomes reality fast. The next few weeks are going to be fascinating. We're going to see a coaching carousel unlike anything we've seen in years. 5 head coaching jobs are open: Browns, Giants, Titans, Raiders, and Falcons. Of those 5, where does Cleveland rank? Probably last, if we're being honest. The dysfunction is real. The quarterback situation is murky at best. The roster has holes everywhere except defense. But hey, at least they've got Shedeur Sanders, right? The kid deserves a fair shot. He deserves a coach who believes in him. He deserves an offensive coordinator who can build a system around his strengths: elite accuracy, quick processing, mobility when needed. He deserves an offensive line that can give him time. He deserves receivers who can separate. Whether he gets any of that remains to be seen. Kevin Stefanski will land on his feet. He's already being mentioned as a top candidate for the Titans and Giants jobs. Some team is going to look at his resume: 2-time Coach of the Year, playoff appearances, that magical season with Baker, and say, yeah, we can work with that. And maybe in a different situation, with a different quarterback, with a different front office, he'll thrive. But in Cleveland, it was over the moment he didn't fully buy into Shedeur. That's the lesson here. In today's NFL, the quarterback is the franchise. If you're not aligned with your organization on who that quarterback should be, you're toast. Doesn't matter how many awards you've won. Doesn't matter how many games you've coached. Doesn't matter what your track record says. If you're on the wrong side of the quarterback debate, you're gone. Kevin Stefanski learned that the hard way, and whoever the Browns hire next better learn it fast, because Jimmy Haslam isn't playing games anymore. He's got his quarterback. Now he needs a coach who believes in him. The clock is ticking, the pressure is mounting. And somewhere in Berea, Ohio, Shedeur Sanders is preparing for year 2, with or without the coach who refused to believe in him. Welcome to Cleveland, where dysfunction is a feature, not a bug. Where coaches get fired for quarterback disagreements, where hope springs eternal, and disappointment is always just around the corner. Kevin Stefanski is gone. Shedeur Sanders remains. And the Browns? Well, they're still the Browns. Buckle up. This is going to be one hell of an offseason.